To be, to become, to begin, where the river leans to the sea. To learn, to let go, to love. The world turns endless, turning me.
Coffee. So essentially what we would like to explore today is where does a shared moral compass come from if we have collectively killed God, and then which gave us this moral compass a long time ago, and then we also collectively killed nature in the sense that we have assumed dominance over nature, even if we know that that's not even possible. But we've killed the idea that we are part of life and nature in a way. And so the question rising from that is, what could give rise to a shared sense of morality for us all as a foundational prerequisite for a larger scale shift, right? No, not inside a membrane, not inside a small group of people, but at a larger scale. What could be helping us get that compass? So that's the question.
Yeah, that's a good question and a hard question, and one that philosophers have been wrestling with for at least 3,000 years, right?
Yeah.
Is there an external morality, or is morality situational, or is there something in between? And, I'll tell you, frankly, there's no real clear answer. I mean, the best I've been able to come up with is that one should look at from a human-centric perspective, which is not necessarily correct from a universal perspective. I mean, if you're a species on Alpha Centauri, you may or may not care what the people on good old planet Earth are doing, at least not until you get interstellar travel. But from the perspective of humanism, shall we say, human well-being in the aggregate has to be, it seems to me, what the hell is this going on here? Has to be a North Star. But again, that gets to be difficult. Human well-being for everybody, human well-being for an elite, human well-being for me and my cousins, very still not tied down all that well. And if we then expand our circle of sympathy to include all of humanity, the ability for any of us to accomplish very much in that direction is small, and yet it feels like ethically the right rule. But where that rule comes from, I'm not sure.
Okay, so one question that we could ask is, could this be something we can boot deliberately? So there's I found a story many years ago of some African tribe where part of your initiation rite as you become an adult is to spend time alone in the forest until you have met your God, your personal God. And that God, and then you create a symbol of that God that then is your guide through life. And that is a very interesting experience because somehow you consciously make that thing, right? You are aware of its creation. You could even decide that it doesn't really exist, but still it's an important thing guiding you. So it's one question of it's a similar question was differentiation between is there meaning of life and meaning in life. We might never know whether there's meaning of life, but we can find meaning in life, right? So the question here really is, can we do that collectively? How can we boot that collectively as a decision?
Yeah, very interesting, and also potentially very dangerous. Consider the history of dominant religions, right?
Hmm.
Where they've been the basis for many empires, the basis for many persecutions, crusades, etc. And this is where the game B concept of coherent pluralism comes in, quite similar to the Enlightenment principle of freedom of consciousness and freedom of conscious in the religious sense. If you want to be a Jew, you want to be a Hindu, you want to be a Buddhist, the Enlightenment fathers would say, that's fine. Just don't try to impose your system on others, at least not by force. You can do it by persuasion if you're so inclined. So it makes me a little dubious of this idea of a universal sense of ethics, because that how does that differentiate from a universal religion that could easily become coercive and dangerous?
Yeah, I think there might be middle ground between arguing from some bottom up and arguing top down and creating an ideology. And that could simply be grounded in the reality of the human experience. So what I'm trying to say is ultimately what we're trying to do when we try to find a meaning of life or a higher reason or driver for morality is that we try to find something outside of the human experience. But it might be that there is something common to all of us and all of the experience of what it means to be a human being that could be a driver for our moral compass. And that thing might just be emerging from the necessities of being in the world as a human being, right? So it's very tied to the experience as a human in the world, but it's very common in that.
You can even extend that into the animal world. For instance, we know that many higher animals, at least, have an emotion that seems to be the same as empathy, right? They won't intentionally torture a member of their own species, even to get food or even to get their freedom. They show sympathy from when a fellow animal is injured, and they'll nurse them, etc. So perhaps one can bootstrap from our animal nature of empathy and sympathy, which could lead us first to human well-being and human flourishing as a North Star. And then at the same time, our natural flourishing, because our world, deeply considered a human world, is very deeply dependent on the natural world. And I think those two kind of hang together and could even be bootstrapped from our animal nature. Though I'll tell you, I have another, now we're talking about this, another perspective, which unfortunately I can't ground anywhere. It's just sort of my own inclinations and taste. I favor systems that generate interestingness, right? So for instance, free people generate more interesting culture on average. Nature, unmolested or molested minimally, produces much more interesting hierarchies and food chains and food webs and new species and things of that ilk. And that if we use that as a pruning rule, that might not be too bad. What will produce more interesting results? In the same way, I'd argue that if we look at the long arc of emergence, life produces more interesting results than physics does. Physics seems to ground out at maybe stars, something like that. Stars are interesting enough, but they're nowhere near as interesting and diverse and open-ended in their exploration as life is. So we can say life is more interesting than physics or even biochemistry. And then humans, because they have general intelligence, are more interesting than other life. And nature has an interestingness of its own, which supports human life, but also has other dimensions of interestingness that are going on in parallel on a very high degree of parallel processing and searching for the interesting.
Yeah, but interesting can have many forms. So since I'm hopping between let's say, winter culture and tropical culture. I think both of these require deep collaboration, but in different ways. So in winter culture in Europe, basically, if you don't coordinate and collaborate as a community, you will have trouble surviving the winter. And here, where I'm in right now in Costa Rica, there is no such thing as a winter. Whether you pluck that papaya today or tomorrow really doesn't make much of a difference. But at any point, there might be a devastating earthquake, or a volcano might erupt, or a hurricane might hit. So you need to have a very strong, cohesive social network that can help you in those moments, and therefore that being in a form of a collaborative mode, but into completely different modalities, is an expression of the requirements of the environment, and can be interesting in both ways, but is very, very different, but still has a coherent core, which is the interdependence, the interbeingness, the overcoming of the illusion of the separate.
Yeah, no, them both can be grounded out in human flourishing if taken over a long enough arc of time, right? If you're
Okay.
not doing the relatively tight-knit community in Northern Europe, your human flourishing will fail to flourish. If you're not having a community that's resilient to natural disasters in Costa Rica, then at some point in the future, your community will also suffer grievously in the area of flourishing.
Yeah,
So I think you can
exactly.
look at both of those as tactics for human flourishing over a longer arc of time, basically. Yeah.
So could one grounding be the felt and necessary, from the human experience, at least, perspective, the interdependence, the sense of interdependence? Could that be sufficient for building a shared moral compass on a global level?
Again, I think we can look to what how humans have lived in the past, and how forager humans live today. To your point about a person in Northern Europe, they'll starve over the winter. Truth is, a single person plopped down in the Amazon is likely to starve or get eaten by a jaguar or something fairly quickly. Humans are clearly social animals,
Mm-hmm.
in the same way that wolves are clearly social animals. It doesn't make any sense to be a single human, really,
Mm-hmm.
at least not for any period of time. So the fundamentally collective nature of human experience is, I think, another potential grounding. But again, it gets
Mm-hmm.
into these hard questions. For who? Should it be my clan that annihilates all the others, and we have a very nice, tight clan experience, plus all these resources we've taken, or can we extend that circle of sympathy further afield? That it's
Mm-hmm.
always been one of the great tensions of moral questions, at least moral questions that don't come from outside. Perhaps one of the reasons that people have taken the easy way out and imported moral answers from the outside.
Mm-hmm. And now that we're at a point where we see that the collective coordination is necessary for our shared survival, because the situation essentially on the planet will become more tropical, in the sense that it becomes more unpredictable. So that's for sure. Where this comes from, when it will happen, how it will happen, that's all up for debate. But that it will happen is probably inevitable. So we have created a shared necessity and experience globally that requires for global coordination, for shared survival. So our survival here is not really dependent anymore on only our clan, or a tribe, but on the whole thing. Or am I?
These are like the global coordination problems. The classic one is, how do we coordinate on climate, for instance? Using the
Yeah,
atmosphere
exactly.
as a dump for greenhouse gases is literally a global concern. Everybody has to, or almost everybody has to participate in the solution. And yet there's no obvious way within our economic system or our government systems or the multipolar traps we're caught in to make that happen.
Yeah, that's true. But if we can find a way to ground ourselves in this understanding that we're all connected, which is what so many are trying to do, right? So maybe it's an interesting signal that so many people and various groups are beginning to talk or have started talking about that for a long time, but um, are talking about interdependence and interbeing. Maybe that's we're witnessing some emerging of a new modality of grounding our moral compass in that. Maybe it's already happening.
Yeah, and then the hard question is, how do you get it to scale? We know humans can live in community of 50 to 150, maybe a little bit more, but how do we have a system that connects moral behavior for 10 billion people?
Mhm.
Let me pull back something we talked about before, and again, this is
Mhm.
a Jim Ruddism, but I like it, which is that here we are, the first, as far as we know, general intelligence in the universe. And I've argued that we have a moral obligation to preserve general intelligence and move it forward out into the universe,
Mhm.
and either bring the universe to light or to life or to something more interesting, or to discover that we're part of a global, galactic civilization that already exists, and that presents itself with another set of potential moves that have some moral consequence. But until we know that we're not alone, I would suggest that the cautionary principle and just understanding of the stakes would argue that we should assume we are alone, and we need to preserve our general intelligence and probably our technological civilization still has to be able to, really take advantage of our general intelligence until we've either gone out into the universe or concluded that there are lots of other people out there and we should establish a modus operandi with them. So maybe that's the deep
Uh,
grounding, is that we need to
that, that,
preserve
mhm.
general intelligence until it can find its place in the universe.
That's a slippery slope because since we are not even able to maintain balance on our own planet, we could argue that we're not actually that that intelligent, and that our job is not to um, move our own intelligence beyond the planet, but the intelligence that we create that moves beyond us, right? So that gives rise to the uh, the tech bro narrative of accelerationism and human machine merging.
Transhumanism, etc.
Yeah.
Right, and that is true. And then I suppose the next question um, is there something fundamentally ethical about preserving humanity? You know, is that something that we should add on? And I was pondering that yesterday in the question about could we slow down AI? There's been
Mm,
how many letters have people signed? I've signed a couple of them. From the fathers of AI calling for the a 6 month moratorium, or
mhm,
don't go beyond X, and
mhm,
absolutely nothing has happened.
mhm,
Uh, uh, and I came up with sort of a pseudo religion that uh, humanity is the game that we're playing, and we should stop anything that threatens humanity's place in the universe. And that might mean just getting rid of AI entirely.
mhm,
It follows from the consequence. It follows from the axiom, essentially. If humans are our purpose and the destiny of humans in the universe is our goal, then let's wipe out AI, or at least knock it way down to a relatively harmless pre-LLM level, until we know a heck of a lot more about it. We're rushing forward. We're building atomic bombs with the knowledge of a 3-year-old. Now, again, is human supremacy a fundamental ethical grounding point? What do you think?
I wouldn't say supremacy. I would say purely the existence. So I'm what I sense is a humility in the context of all life, right? All life is interesting if it is an intricate, complex web, and it's not interesting when it's a um, technocratic machinery that is under our full control, right?
Like a industrial agriculture wheat field, for instance.
For example, right? And then also it stops being life, and it stops being part of life, and etc. So all I can argue from is the human experience. I know nothing else, and therefore I don't know whether anything can be found outside or anything can be grounded outside of that. And to me, the real question is, can we find some commonality that we can all link ourselves to and say, okay, that's part of the human experience that we all share, that is for us, for that human existence, sufficient to allow for us to coordinate and make this experience continue. So I don't think there's a supremacy here. I wouldn't be surprised if we at one point found that whales are actually far more intelligent than us, and far more evolved than us, and have much deeper poetry and art and etc. than us. I would not be surprised in the least. So
certainly quite possible. They've got big brains and they have sophisticated communication systems.
Correct. So I wouldn't.
Supremacy is probably not the right word. Maybe the anchor is human existence as the top terrestrial animal, if we want to establish ourselves.
Why the top, right? I mean, maybe let's just play with that thought. Maybe whales are the top.
Because they're not land animals, so let them have the sea, right?
and yeah, but they could be quite flexible, right? Given a couple of hundred million years, they can come back to land if they want. So the question is not, is there a top, right? The question is, what is our role to play in this web? So if you talk about interestingness as a good indicator, then us playing a part in that entire web that helps that web become more intricate, more complex, more alive, that then in turn gives us a better foundation for our own thriving, right? And grounding that knowledge is also extending the interconnectedness from between humans, between our communities, and the global community of humanity, into being a part of the web of life, and in that playing the best we can into the flourishing of that, for selfish reasons and and if it's only for selfish reasons, that's completely fine. But maybe whales went already beyond that point, right? Maybe whales have understood that, and that's why they seem not intelligent to us, but they're actually far beyond us.
So, Dr., what you're talking about is quite reminiscent of Tyson Yunka Porter's concept of humans as custodial species,
Yeah.
whose
Yeah.
job it is to make nature as interesting as it can be, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I would add back in and make human flourishing as it can be. And to your
Mm-hmm.
point, you bridge the two together to the degree that humans are embedded in a flourishing and natural environment. They seem to be happier and saner. And so the two sides work together.
Mm-hmm. And now, stepping back from that again, is that something that every human being could connect with, regardless of ideology or place or culture? And if so, is that something that we could see as the foundation within the human experience for a moral compass? What would you say?
Let's think about that. Well, certainly there are plenty of humans today, probably most of them, who would not put a flourishing and interesting natural world very high up uh, in their values tree. So the question is, what's it take to get people to back off of having that new car or the bigger house or the window air conditioner if you're in Bangladesh, etc. What is the move to get people to move the value compass from the exploitive and what's the right word here? Exploitive is probably as good a word as any. Attitude versus one of coevolution, nurturing, and stewardship of humans in the natural world together.
Well, I don't think we have to convince anybody. I mean, we can start with what has been known for a while now, that what people value at the end of life is never not having bought enough Porsches, right?
Right.
It's so we seem to be very coherent around something once we are at a point where um, maybe fear goes away, right? Because at that point, um, you you don't you're at the end of the accumulation modality, whether you want it or not, right? So you can with more ease let go and say, hmm, actually it's about relationship, and that's what everybody seems to say. And that's also what you find if you give people the space and time and play to explore what it is that they would really love to see in the world. So and that's always very, very coherent, very similar to what's been documented, people having said at the end of life. So I think this we all already carry that. We don't allow it to be articulated or even lived into because we're too afraid. But
And
if
we,
we take away the fear, then it can flourish.
yeah, and big part of the fear is about insecurity. Right? Being part
Hmm.
of the game feels secure, even though it may not be in the long term, as opposed to doing something different on your own, not working a regular job, not having health insurance, all the things that today, at least, which in Game B world we call currents, that are working against people leaving the game. Uh,
Hmm.
and so, a move on, have to articulate the move on a values perspective with a real world move at the same time,
Hmm.
so that people can live the way we just talked about and yet not feel grossly insecure. Because
Okay,
I think we know, looking at history, that in fact, I'm reading an interesting book now on the emergence of dominator culture and hierarchies, and
yeah.
it's quite clear that most of the time, it's either straightforward conquest by warlords or people claiming to provide security either against droughts, the religious theocracy types, or against hostile neighbors, the classic state builder types. And so fear of insecurity is a huge driver of human behavior. And if we can't address that, then getting people to move their moral compass is going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And today it's
And
the opposite. If you move your moral compass, it seems like at least your insecurity increases.
And what are you referring to exactly when you say insecurity? Is it biological, physical? Is it emotional, intellectual? What kind of insecurity?
Yeah, it's all the above, right? That you feel worse in your being than you did in the alternative. And at the most extreme, you and your family starved to death, or killed by the local warlord, or turned into slaves by the local enslaver, which is considerably worse than being a invisible, but more or less free within bounds of a citizen of an aristocracy, which is what humans have lived most of their lives. And so, how do you get the move from being a quiet subject of an aristocracy to something else when the alternatives may well look worse?
Which to me is already answered in the largest and most successful economy on the planet, which is nature, and really participating in that economy in the way that it works can create abundance on an individual level, which then helps us be less insecure because we don't have to worry about our own livelihood or that of our own closest family. And then if we're really, really secure in that, it's very easy to share with others, which then will give rise to the experience of being stronger together, which already is not a learning, it's a remembering, because we already knew that. We've just forgotten that through the layers of abstraction we've built over time. So, in other words, the material pathway, the providing the essential things for a fulfilled life on a material level, a solid, safe, pretty house, and food security, and clothing at a very minimum. Once we have that independent of or can have that at least independent of the rest of society, then we might be free. And that is what you said, that freedom creates more interestingness.
Yes, and that does feel like an inflection point. And what does that actually mean, right? If you want to live as a early 21st century person, you need computer chip factories and airplane manufacturers and air traffic control systems and all kinds of stuff that are highly interdependent and highly driven by the money on money systems. So bootstrapping to basic survival may not be anywhere near enough.
I'm not sure about that. So 21st century, yes, but limited to all the things you said. Basically limited to about 1 billion people, really, because it's actually not that many people that do fly. But almost everybody on the planet is worried about their immediate livelihood, right? And somebody might be worried about not having enough personal space and needs more space, but somebody else might just be worried about not having a roof that can hold the rain, right? But if you are able in both cases to cater to that need, whether somebody else might agree that that's necessary or not, if you can cater to that for the 7-8 billion people who don't even think about flying, on their own terms, without having to go and Uber in the next city in the hope that they will one day have enough money to build a shelter, which is what's happening now. But if you instead create the material pathways that allow you to create the materials in place, right? And then this is, I think it's it's actually a question of something like glass. I think something like glass could solve that massively and across all climatic regions, because we've already known how to build beautiful and safe and solid and clever houses with local materials. But glass helps us to regulate heat, passive solar, right? We can, if you put a like a tiny greenhouse kind of structure on the south wall of your house and have some openings on the top and bottom, you have a passive solar heating system in your house. So we can harvest the clay from the local soil, and we can build with straw, so that's all possible. But we cannot yet grow glass locally. So if we did that, then we would go a long way. If we did the same with hot water piping.
Okay, hold on a second here. I'm just going to.
Yeah.
All righty, see you later. Okay.
All right. So that's if we did that in a way that nature would do it, nature does do glass stuff that's similar to glass, shells and
Obsidian.
nacre and things like that, obsidian. And so if we learned how to do that in place with the tooling that nature has and this has been using, called enzymes and sugars and sunlight, then the need for many people to go and steal stuff from their neighbors and exploit would go away, because it would be catered for.
That would be a great vision if we actually had robust local technology above the level of foragers. And
it needs to be above the forage level.
And agriculture was our first step there, and the trap was that the power of agriculture was that it reduced the risk from climatic fluctuations, basically. So that one drought didn't wipe you out or your clan out. And you could store, after a period of time, you could store a year or two's grain. And that provided some resilience. But it also, and this is key, and this book I'm reading makes it very clear, a lootable resource suddenly gives your neighbors an incentive to come and kill you and take your resource. And then your developed land is also a resource. And then somewhere along the line, people realize, women, they're also a resource. So kill the men and take the women. And, the basic level, and even though all these people probably had a basic level of subsistence that was just fine, the multipolar trap of take or defend against taking, and that often leads to developing the power to take, has been historically a real trap on the road up from self-sufficiency.
But maybe it's more like the whales. So we hardly know anything about the Harappan civilization in the Indus Valley, for example.
That's one of the few examples that it looks like it was able to maintain an egalitarian, non-exploitive system for a considerable period of time.
So it's within what humans can do, right? It's not like that human nature requires exploitation. It is it might be just a unfortunate emergence from circumstance, right? And if we if you can change circumstance to be closer to whatever the Harapian people experienced, maybe we unlock whatever that they were experiencing in terms of what it means to be a human being.
And we've talked about this before. The forager people, even though they recognize that there were exploiters in their midst, they develop an operating system to not let the exploiters exploit. And that was not replicated when we went from forager to agriculture, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you need to be secure in that because exploiters usually come in the shape of dark triad, so they can they're really, really good at manipulating people that are specifically people that are insecure, and in whichever modality of being insecure. But so deep security prevents that from happening.
At least we think so. And then, one of the earliest Game B concepts was cultivated insecurity. For instance, we look around at the United States, the richest big country in the history of the world, and yet large numbers of people feel like they're 2 weeks away from being out of money and possibly being on the street. So here's a country that's got a per capita GDP of, I don't know, $90,000 a year. So a family of three, $270,000 a year. And yet large percentages of our people, and probably everybody who isn't a millionaire, feels that they are at some level of precarity in our society, even though it's so rich that it's absurd. No one's going to starve, right? But psychologically, through the building of psychological needs and just general propaganda, we keep everybody on their toes by feeling insecure. How do we prevent that? And is that actually a useful strategy in the co-evolutionary competition amongst societies?
Well, I think it's a how we prevent that by building the membranes that you use to describe as a bubble in which that security can start happening, and then that being used as an example for others to see that that's even possible, and then from there it can scale out. So I think the once you know how to bootstrap or what to bootstrap, you know how to bootstrap. And I think the question of building security and safety across all the necessary vectors for individuals is the core function of the membrane. And then to be able to show that, but it's nothing new. I think it's just a remembering of what that actually means, because we've largely lost that, and then adding to that maybe new modalities of how to think about the material pathways in a more evolved way than we've done so far, right? So instead of using 90 terawatt of energy coming from burning rotten algae to brute force material into existence and to move 100 billion tons of stuff every year, we can do something like nature does and move 150 billion tons of stuff per year without waste and pollution. And if you look at cutting edge material science, we know that's possible. And if you look at indigenous knowing, then we know that's possible. So beyond this pure subsistence state.
Yeah, and it is true that the ethical and way of being is coevolutionary with the technological substrate. As things as you described, the heliocentric civilization and building materials in place and having abundant food sources that are very robust against climate change, etc., would enable a substantial bootstrap of security, even at relatively small initial membrane styles, and that would help a lot. But of course, we're only partway there today.
Yeah, because, and that's another reason for the membrane, because the current modality doesn't really like that idea because it's not exploitable. Right? Once this kind of knowledge is out there, kombucha is one of my favorite examples, right? It's everybody can do it. It grows exponentially. You can do it at home. It tastes great. It can it's healthy, and it's makes Coca-Cola obsolete. And if you uh, then translate that into basically every other material modality in your life, nobody in the current paradigm will want that. So creating a membrane that allows for the protection of these kinds of this kind of knowledge and this kind of IP that then can be um, scaled out across the world, that could be one of the modalities that can actually help us step out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah, kombucha is interesting. There are people who make their own kombucha, but here in the United States, at least, you go to the grocery store and there's 50 varieties for sale at a price higher than Coca-Cola.
Yeah. 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 But you can do it. And I think that's the important thing. You only have to buy one bottle, and there's always some SCOBY floating around in that, which you can then cultivate and start making your own kombucha at home.
Yep.
So, and that's nature, that's life, right? Because the thing, uh, this drink is a life. We shouldn't forget that, right? It's actual life, and we're participating in that, and that's what makes it so healthy.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to,
Mhm.
we've had some interesting conversations here that point about ways and possible uh, senses of ethics, but I don't think we ever got to anything that seemed like a short statement of a groundable ethics that could bring forth what we're talking about. Any thoughts on what that might be?
Hmm. Unfortunately, nothing that I can ground in anything outside of my own experience, and then so it's very empirical. It's nothing I can ground in anything outside of my empirical experience of life and what I believe others around me are experiencing. So I cannot ground it in something absolute, um, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I have always been an anti-foundationalist in philosophy. I believe that humans are kind of caught in the middle between the Planck dimensions and the cosmological, and we do the best we can here in the middle, and that's basically all there is to it. But as our conversation indicated, there are groundings in human nature. There's groundings in the nature of animal empathy. There are groundings in the fact that humans, in particular, are very much social beings. There's a grounding in the fact that human flourishing and well-being is intimately involved with natural flourishing and well-being. So there's a lot of situational components, and
Mhm,
perhaps
mhm,
that's the better way to think about it. Go through and see if we
mhm,
can assemble the situational components which indicate a vector rather than trying to find, which so many people do, including us early in the conversation, some
mhm.
kind of grounding in universals that would tell us what to do. I suspect such a thing does not exist.
And this grounding as a vector, I like that very much, that picture, is essentially what I notice many religions or other schools of thoughts try to show us, right? The that we're embedded as part of life, and that is our job, and that's our only job. And then a more a more sciencey sounding, at least, way to say this is what you just said, being a vector between all of the components of what makes up life. And And I like that very much.
Yeah, and
It's
specifically human life, right? Human nature.
yeah.
What is it the humans need more? And then it gets back to this interesting question, this idea I had yesterday: should humans stand up and say no to AI? It's an interesting question. I love AI. There's some things that will come from AI which will be miraculous, and on the other hand, if we go too far, we certainly risk losing our humanity.
I think we should stand up and say no to a lot of stuff. And the question is, what gives us the security to do that? Right now, AI is part of the reason why we cannot resist doing it is because we are at the end of our wits when it comes to doing the human game, and we're in the hope of building machinery that can teach us of how to do it properly. That's and the people most insecure about this, and at the same time most aware about the dangerous situation we're in, are the ones building that stuff.
Yes, as we've seen
And
lately, the security people are leaving the big AI companies and giving out warnings.
yeah, and but essentially what somebody like Tyson would already tell us what the machine will then tell us. It's basically the same thing. It's quite obvious once you've seen it, which is stop trying to dominate life and just start being a part of life again. In If you must be on the top of the hierarchy, then at least be the apex custodian. But actually, don't be any apex thing. There's no such thing as an apex. There's only a interconnected web of interdependence that you are part of, and the better you do your job, the better your life is. And that's my prediction. That's what the machine will tell us. So we already know we don't need the machine for that. And I think we already have tested an AI and it got out of hand and we weren't able to stop it and we're not consciously able to stop it, which is what we usually call the market.
Or the
Um,
corporation, at least, the big,
or the corporation, neither of which we can really control. Um, and we weren't able to say no to those either, right? Because we were hoping for the promise they were giving us, which was somehow solving for a better life.
and it
Now,
did.
if
I
we if
mean, I do this as part of my research on the transition
mm,
from game A to game B. Relatively unfettered markets was one of the ingredients in around 1700 that let game A take off. And for quite a while, humanity got much healthier, wealthier. Famines almost disappeared. Children no longer died half on by the time they were 5. The power of the market was extremely powerful in liberating humanity from many years of exquisite poverty. But it had no brakes; it couldn't stop.
yeah, it couldn't stop, and it essentially also created many more humans in the process, which is an unintended side effect. Um, we we've come to think of the growth of humanity as an intrinsically good thing.
Yeah, and here we now have we'll have 10 billion people by the time the population growth starts finally to reverse around 2170, 2180. And without advanced technology, we could support at most 2 billion. So we're living on our
Hmm.
advanced technological stack, and should it collapse, something on the order of 8 billion people will die.
Hmm.
I unfortunately have got to go. I've got another call here coming up. This was good. I don't
Okay.
think we solved anything, but we did tease a
Nope.
lot of things apart.